Hi, and welcome to another newspaper article, Lucky Dip, with myself, Jenny, Elfie Boy, and our most beautiful of co-hosts, Yvette. We'll steal Yvette's hat, if she'll let us have it. Okay, trigger warnings, I don't know. I don't know what's coming out the hat. Last time we didn't have any trigger warnings. There was a wee kind of delve into death custom and death in general, really. But it wasn't like murders or anything gory, so that was nice. But I don't know what we'll get this time around. So check down below in the description. It'll tell you what's come out the hat in today's episode, so as not to distress you unduly. And we'll just get into this, shall we? Nay, we're going to just do this, Elfie Boy. Yes, I think so too. Oh, a few. Let's see. We have the Jedburgh Gazette for the 16th of May 1874, and we'll see what the Jedburgh Gazette has for us. So if the title of this one is anything to go by, it would seem like we've had something of a lucky break. We've got quite a positive start to our episode. We have gallant rescue from drowning. A boy named Swabby, son of a farm labourer at Martindale's, was seen to fall from the ferry boat into the river with him. Mr. G. Robinson, MRCS of Sheffield, who was in a train, witnessing the accident, immediately jumped from the carriage, ran to the riverside and plunged into the water. He caught hold of the boy's clothes and swam with him to shore. Mr. Robinson re-entered the railway carriage and travelled in his wet clothes to Lincoln, where he purchased a new suit in order to be able to complete his journey to Sheffield. Mr. Robinson's gallant conduct is worthy the recognition of the Royal Humane Society. Really? I mean, nowadays that's kind of hard to imagine. This was 1874, so even quite late on into the 20th century, railway carriage doors were not like automatically secured when the trains were on the go. There were a lot of accidents of people falling out of train doors as the train's on the go. It doesn't say whether the carriage was on the move. I have to assume it was stationary. Maybe it was at a station or something. And he's seen the boy falling off a ferry into a river, so it's not a pond of still water. I assume there's some kind of current. He's decided, instead of thinking, well, I'm in a train, he is out on the river. I know, Meow Boy. It's crazy, right? He's out in the river. There's nothing I can do for him. Hopefully someone helps the lad. No, he's literally left the carriage. I assume people have seen him leave the carriage, which is why he was able to get back on again. Otherwise, why would the train have stuck around? He's got out of the train and he's made it to the boy still before anyone else has. No one on the ferry has jumped in to save this boy. No one maybe on the riverside has managed to get to the boy. A guy on the train has managed to make it to that boy to save him before anyone else, and there's no way he was the closest person to that boy. There's just no way. Like, even if the place was barren, he's going to have been on the boat with people, and none of them jumped in to save him. And he just seems to have just real nonchalantly gone back into the carriage, wet clothes and all, and has, just made himself more comfortable halfway through his journey by obtaining a new suit. How did he get dressed into the new suit? Did he just get changed in the middle of the carriage? Maybe 1874, it was likely going to be like the wee private rooms that you see in Poirot and these old school kind of trains. They probably had personal, bookable little rooms, so to speak. Maybe personal carriages. There were a lot of private carriages that could just be attached to trains to take people of money wherever they wanted to go. And that was right up. I don't know if it lasted much longer than after the First World War. But maybe, I don't know, I'm trying really hard to imagine this whole scenario playing out. Again, people must have seen him for the train to have hung around so that he could get back on board. But it's quite the story on yourself, Mr. Robinson. Future editing Jen here. Now, I've had a look on Google Maps. This is the point at which the river is closest to the line. From anywhere else on the lead up to Lincoln en route to Sheffield, it just doesn't come near enough, especially where the line of sight is unimpeded, to be able to see the river. It would have to be close to the river from the very fact that he got there before anybody else. My main question is still, was the train stationary or was it moving? Because there's no station here. The next station would appear to be Lincoln. Was there a station somewhere very close by previously? I don't know. I can't think that he disembarked from a moving train though, because that would have been putting his own life at risk. Even a slow moving train, you're risking serious injury trying to disembark. Was it perhaps fortunately stopped for some other reason? Did he maybe see this incident and pull the emergency cord or ring some kind of an emergency bell that would alert the driver that the train needed to be stopped? It doesn't say in the article. That would again be going over and above the call of duty, because you're then inconveniencing your fellow passengers who are going to want to know why their journey has been delayed. I don't know. It is curious. I haven't been able to find further information. MRCS. Educated man. Crazy. Says it's worthy the recognition of the Royal Humane Society. I wonder if he was recognised by the Royal Humane Society, maybe presented with some kind of certificate or token medal or something. Wouldn't be surprised. Okay, the next out the hat we have The Witness for the 9th of September 1840. A wee bit of an earlier article. We'll see what The Witness has for us. Okay, so for this one, I can't tell you what it's about by the title. It just has the boundary line. The late Mr. Sergeant Lenz used to tell with great glee the following anecdote of his learned brother of the coif, Mr. Sergeant Hill. Having business to transact with him, he went to his chambers in New Square, Lincoln's Inn, and found him with the bookcases, tables, chairs, and carpets on one side of the room, the quantity of furniture crowded together, hardly leaving space for the learned lawyer to move on that side of the room, while the other half of the apartment was without a single article. After the usual greeting, "Pray," said Mr. Sergeant Lenz, "what do you intend to do with all the furniture arranged in this strange fashion?" The learned sergeant replied that since half his chambers had been found to stand in the parish of St. Clement Danes, he had formed this encampment on the side of the room belonging to Lincoln's Inn, to prevent the officers from distraining his goods for the poor rates. At a future period, Mr. Sergeant Lenz visited his brother in distress, as he facetiously termed him, and actually found the officers in the apartments, they having effected an entrance through the back windows, and his learned brother daring them to touch his goods out of the parish, the boundary of which he had carefully marked on the floor. The officers were so intimidated at the threats that they never again molested the learned sergeant, who continued to reside in the chambers without paying any parochial dues. A case similar to this one occurred only a few days since in the very same parish. So not a charitable man then. So I'm not sure if the lingo of this one has maybe gotten over some people's heads, but the distraining of his goods, he's talking about how he would be taxed for any property within the boundary of the parish of, what was it, St. Clement Danes? No. It was Lincoln's Inn. Right, so he's put all of his stuff to the side of Lincoln's Inn. It was St. Clement Danes that was taxing people regarding whatever property they had. And that tax would be to form the basis of some kind of welfare fund for those less well off than himself. Yeah. Yeah. I have to say that in Scotland, we seem to be fairly lucky in that regard. There have been quite a few very rich people, millionaires and such, that came out while the Scottish government raised taxes on the wealthy. Taxes in Scotland are more on the side of those that don't do so well. Those that do very well pay quite a lot more in tax because they can, and there were a few reports from whatever sources saying that all this will serve to do will be to drive the rich out of Scotland. They'll abscond down south where the rates are cheaper. In response to that, again, quite a number of millionaires came out and said, "What are you talking about? I can afford to pay this tax. That tax is nothing to me. And if it's going to go towards a better welfare system, better services, increased services, if it's going to go towards infrastructure, it's going to be to the benefit of everyone that lives here. And I don't care about paying it." Like, yeah. And they were coming out beforehand even saying, like, preemptively saying, "If you want to hike my tax, hike my taxes," like, that we basically trust the government sitting at Holyrood to disperse it well and with a view to helping those that are less well off. This Mr. Sergeant Hill is not such a charitable person, to the point where he's literally inconvenienced himself. He's rented out X amount of space, only half of which he's willing to use because he refuses to pay any tax towards the poor rates. Literally, not a tax that could be spent on like all kinds of things, maybe repairing roads and bridges or whatever. These are poor rates. It's money that's going to specifically go towards helping those less well off than him. And he's like, nah, I'm going to live all cramped to one side of my room just to avoid that. I would say some bad words about him, but we don't swear on this channel, so, well, not in a way that goes unbleeped. Okay, and our third is the Caledonian Mercury for the 22nd of November 1731. And we'll see what the Caledonian Mercury has for us. It's an old article. So there's no title for this one. We have the same day also died in the Canongate, William Adey, well known by the name of the old bellman of that place. 'Tis not certainly known, and great pity it is, how old he was, having given over all reckoning that way since he was 100 years old. One thing we're sure of, that he was a domestic of our kind protector Oliver, assume that's Cromwell, and ever since that reign, we're told, he has been bellman in Canongate. He was 36 years old before he married his first wife, with whom he lived in all conjugal felicity for above 60 years. He married a sturdy young Frau long after he was 100 years, who says he was her kind, loving husband for above 10 years, but was so reduced with age in his last days that he stood supported by her when he rang the bell. He had been about 90 years a freeman in Canongate. He said he had buried the good people in Canongate 3 several times, but that he thought this 4th generation so degenerate that rather than serve him that way, he chose to ring in himself. Oh. It's kind of strange how every generation seems to get to a point in their dotage where they just despair over the new generation that's coming in, whether it's music or the way they dance or whatever they're into. Okay, so it doesn't give an idea of how old he is. It says that he married a woman long after he was 100 years old, and that he was her husband for over 10 years. Can't have been that long, over 100 years old. Say it's only 5 years after his centenary. That would still make him at least 115 when he died. I don't know. And that phrasing, 3 several times, several in that context just meant individual, separate times. So I assume when it says he buried the good people in Canongate 3 several times, maybe they're talking about generations of people. I think back then a generation said to be about 30 years. So yeah, that would make sense. That's 90 years. So I'm going to have to assume that it's 3 generations of the people in the Canongate. And apparently he was an anti-monarchist, being in favour of Cromwell prior to Charles II coming back in again, the Restoration. So Maybe that's why he thought that people were degenerate now, was that they'd gone back to showing fealty to a monarch. Who knows? Future editing, Jen again. So we have here from the Herald, it seems to have been published on the 18th of November 1989. It tells us that in Scotland on November the 19th, 1731, William Eadie, bellman of the Cannon Gate, died aged 120. A freeman of Edinburgh, he married for the second time at the age of 100. So there you go. I mean, he couldn't have been less than 115 if his story was to be believed. Can we believe that? He could certainly make the claim to that age, being as there would be no one around still alive who would have known him in his youth to be able to reveal his fraud in that way. His wives certainly seemed to believe that he was as old as he stated. So there we go. Should we have a last? Am I tempting it? Is it guaranteed that I'm either going to get a really terrible bad luck one or a really long one? I could be here all night. Mixing these around a lot. Let's see what we get. So we have the Kirkintilloch Herald for the 14th of July, 1897. We're in 100 years after that last year, 150 years. Let's see what it has for us. From the first couple of words in this article, it would seem that we're not ending on a particularly sunny note. And it's not the shortest article. We'll just get on with this one. This will finish us. It says, a suicidal epidemic generally breaks out in the French capital during the summer, and statisticians have frequently commented on the rather strange circumstance that there are more cases in the bright, cheerful months of June and July than in dark November days. Possibly the heat may have something to do with this annual wave of self-destructive impulse that sweeps over Paris. By affecting the mind, as one must conclude from the frivolous pretexts adduced that the unfortunate victims were not responsible for their actions. From a list published in the Paris papers of these impatient ones who could not wait till life came to its natural close, it appears that within the last few days, people have been jumping into the Seine, throwing themselves from first-floor windows, hanging themselves, or blowing out their brains on no weightier grounds than a quarrel with a sweetheart, a stake lost at a horse race, the misfit of a new dress. Mere trifles, in a word, unworthy of the name of troubles. One young person, we read, a singer at a concert hall, hardly more than 17 years of age, destroyed herself with singular levity, seeing that she had really no substantial grievance to bring against life. She dined merrily with a party of friends, the banquet de la mort, the foolish girl called it, and after inviting each of them to indicate what, in his or her opinion, was the pleasantest manner of killing oneself, selected poison. One of her friends, who was a guest at this strange banquet, actually went out and bought her the poison, which she swallowed, succumbing later on to its effects. Then her friends, it is almost charitable to believe that they had been drinking too freely, went to the neighbouring police station to inform the authorities of what had happened, and they seemed, it appears, astonished when they were given to understand they had not done their duty by the poor girl they called their friend. I mean, they got off lightly though, right? Especially the lassie that went and bought the poison. You can't just sit back and watch someone kill themselves and not find yourself implicated in some way, whether you're going to get done with being party to I don't know. I mean, suicide's not a crime. It's not legislated against like it used to be. But would they be done with manslaughter or some kind of? I mean, the lassie that bought the poison certainly would be, if not murder. She's literally provided the means of the girl's death. I mean, if their own, if their only punishment for allowing that to happen is to find themselves astonished by being called anything other than her friend, they've kind of got away lightly. Suicidal epidemic. It is strange if the statistics genuinely showed that people were more likely to kill themselves in the summer. Must be a reason for that. Do you think that with longer days came more expense? You'd be awake for longer, things would be open longer, you'd maybe have to work longer. I don't know. I can understand someone perhaps choosing that path for one of the examples, the losing a bet, but it would have to be a substantial amount of money. I can imagine someone losing at a bet, finding themselves ruined, and perhaps feeling that was their only way out. But a dress not fitting properly, quarrel with a sweetheart. There was an article, I think it made it into one of these newspaper article Lucky Dips, and it was in Glasgow by the Clyde, and a young lassie was walking along with her beau, and they seem to have had an argument, and she's literally just spur of the moment just run towards the Clyde and thrown herself in. And I don't know if the intention was that the young man would feel guilty or horrified or what have you and jump in and save her, but she wasn't saved. Not through any lack of trying, but in these days the woman wore a lot of material, and lots of material gets very heavy when wet, and she seems to have sunk like a stone. I don't know that she meant to end herself, but it's certainly an example of someone killing themselves after the quarrel with a sweetheart, whether intentionally or not. And that's another aspect, I guess, is how many of the suicides were intentional. I would think in the summer, being warmer, there's going to be more larking about, and people weren't in with computers and TVs and things. If they were in, they had newspapers and books maybe, but they were mostly left to entertain themselves, find ways to pass the time, which, I mean, it's hard to even remember what that was like before the internet, much less what it would have been like prior to televisions and radios and easy access to music, etc. But people had a lot of time to fill, and on longer days, when it's warmer, there's going to be more misadventure. So I wonder how many of the suicides in this epidemic actually were. Well, we win some and we lose some. And that's how this episode's finishing. So I may see you for the next one. Take care.